Hey guys, it's Don here from the board. This is the first time I'm trying a live stream, but obviously I haven't advertised this as a live stream, so if you haven't subscribed, then you're probably seeing this as a playback because you won't have received any email notifications about me doing a live stream. Now, I also haven't advertised this on any of the forums or the web pages, any of the communities, so it's kind of really just a bit of a play around. I didn't really know what I wanted to do for a first test live stream, and I also wanted to see what it would actually end up doing on YouTube for the channel too. So I thought I'd do something relatively quick, not super complex, which is a cast. Now, if you search YouTube to look up things in regards to casting artisan caps, there's a whole bunch of different videos out there, and it's all well and good. However, if you narrow it down and you want to look at casting with the synth casting tool, the number of videos out there is actually significantly less. So I thought maybe I would actually do a video about it, but then I thought, why not make it a live cast, a live stream for it anyway, since at the end of the day it's still going to be archived and people can still see what I'm doing. So I don't know how long this is going to take. I'm going to just run through the entire process, and if anybody hops on, fantastic. If nobody does, I'll just treat this as if I'm recording a one-shot record. So I'm just going to turn off the front-facing cam because most of my attention is going to be down on the contents of the table that you can see down here below, and let's get casting. Right, so there goes the camera. So on the table in front, I guess, you can kind of see some bits and pieces here, and I'll just go through some of the bits and pieces that we can see here. Oh, shadows getting casted there a bit. There's my focal eyes. First and foremost, of course, safety is #1 priority, taken from one of YouTube's famous people. Hey, it's Outrage Pudding. How's it going, Chris? Thank you very much for joining. First ever on the board live stream. Fantastic. So I was just going over doing a live stream, and I'm just going to do some casting with the synth, and I was just about to go through all the bits and pieces that are actually here on the table, and we'll have a look at the process and some of my comments in regards to using a synth. So first and foremost, safety, and I have a pair of nitrile gloves. Just gloves, protect your fingers. You don't want chems going everywhere if you don't have to. Got a box of them, 200 at Costco, relatively cheap. It's not worth your health to not use gloves. It's as simple as that. Hey, welcome Tsubasa585. Thank you very much for coming along and checking out the stream. What else have we got in front of here? We've obviously got a synth casting tool down here. So this is the base of the synth, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that, and that's the actual stem insert for the synth. What I've got here is I've got my actual casting resin. So I've got a 2-part, it's a very quick cast resin. I've actually transferred them into dispensing bottles, so it's a little bit easier to work with rather than the larger size bottle that they actually came with. I have a plastic tub with some cups inside as well as pipettes. This means that I won't have any spills that will go all over my workspace. I label my cups and my pipettes with colors, so I actually know what it is and I'm not going to get the wrong ones. And you'll see it matches in regards to the writing of my bottles. So I've got, purple part A, I've got a pipette with purple on it, and then I've got orange with part B, and then I've got my pipette with orange on part B. It's always good to have something to clean up with. Just a roll of toilet paper. It's a good size to work with for my small desk space. This is a mold that is casted with the synth. Now, I'm obviously not going to be creating a silicone mold today because the silicone that I work with is a 24-hour curing silicone, which means you're going to be waiting a long time. So here's one I have prepared earlier. Over here, I've just got some mixing buckets and some paddle pop sticks for mixing with. I have a syringe that doesn't have a needle on it, but this is actually filled with Vaseline, just petroleum jelly for those who don't know what Vaseline is, depending on the country. Yeah, not a problem, Tsubasa. More than happy to go through the process, and if, of course, you got questions, just ask, and if I'm seeing it, I will answer it. Over on this side, I've just got a tray. You can see some of the caps that I've actually done in the past, just playing with testing molds. I've got some wood burning tools, not wood burning, my apologies there, wood carving tools. Now, wood carving tools are really cool because they got nice sharp edges on them, and they've also got flat surfaces, great for scraping and cutting. It's up to you if you want to use, scalpels, craft knives, and things like that. I know that on Binge's actual videos in regards to using the synth himself, he uses something like this. It's just like a craft knife, a Stanley knife. It depends on wherever you are, what you want to call it. But I find the wood carving tools, the straight edges on those are really good to work with. And then on this side, I've got a couple of different probes. So I've got a round probe, and I've also got a sharp probe as well. Okay. The first thing that I want to go over is what exactly is a synth. The synth has been around for a while. The synth is not new, but there is a new variant of it coming out soon. So traditionally, when you have a keycap and you want to make a cast of it, so if you have an artisan cap, and I'll just pull one from my shelf next to me. So here's a cap that I had created a while ago. You can see it's just a bit of sculpting on it, and it's just molded onto an OEM profile. And what you would normally do is you would mount this in a box. I use Lego. You can use cardboard, you can use acrylic, whatever you want. And you would actually mount it inside, you build the walls around it, and then you would fill it with silicone on one side. Once that cured, pop it out of the box, you'd flip it over, you'd make some registration holes, maybe some sprues, fill the other side, and then there you go. There's your mold. One of the challenges and difficulties of doing a traditional casting method, and there's heaps of videos out there on YouTube already on traditional casting with a two-part silicone mold, is that the silicone can degrade and it can break down. And because the stem is such a fine detail and at times a very high level of tolerance required, the silicone can deform, it can wear a lot faster, and so the more casts you do, the less quality you're going to get out of your silicone. And Binge of Hungerworks Studios, along with some of his friends, contacts, communities, developed the synth. Now, so I'm just going to tilt that up towards the camera. You can look up the synth. It's available from time to time on TechKey's website. They are actually in the process of making, I believe, the V1.2. The difference between the V1.2 and this, now I'm calling this the 1.1 because this is not the original synth. It's a variant of the original, second generation, if you want to call it that, is it has a different lock kind of thing on it. There is a thread that was on Geek Hack that Binge had some pictures of it. I don't have the actual link handy at the moment, but up here you'll see where I'm pointing with the probe, that's a maker's mark slot. What you can do is you can actually create a maker's mark and you can actually fill it in there. So every time that you cast a cap, on the back of your cap, you're going to have that maker's mark. Famously, for example, on clacks, you'll see the FX symbol, and that indicates that it's an authentic clack factory or something like that. On the new version, there's actually like a crescent moon that runs along the back here with like a little line that goes up, and I believe that is to increase the grip capability of your modeling medium on the actual synth. Now, because the synth is metal, depending on what you're working with, you may find that it breaks off or comes off the actual platform very easily, and so having that extra groove helps in maintaining the modeling material on top of the synth. He has mentioned that there's a V2 that's going to be modular. I don't know what modular components it will have. People are thinking about it might have top ray on it, or it might be for larger keycap sizes, because obviously this is a standard 1U. People are asking about, can you do 125s or 225s, space bars, etc., etc. So just running over the features quickly. Now, I am in no way paid or affiliated. This is not a sponsored promotion. I paid for this out of my own pocket a long time ago. The synth has a central hole for the stem. Obviously, there's the maker's mark I already talked about. You've got 8 sprue holes, and that's to let out air and resin while you actually fill it. And it has these built-in registrations. The cool thing about these registrations is these bottom two here are actually square and these top two are rectangular, and that means you can never get the incorrect orientation of the actual synth into your mold. If we flip it over, you'll still see the 8 sprue holes, and then there's the actual center stem insert with a shelf for the actual insert to sit on. Now, this is the insert itself. It's good quality, it's well machined to a certain degree. You'll see it has the crucifix, which is the equivalent to a actual stem. So if I can get the focus a little bit better there. And then this fatter part here is actually what sits on that inner shelf. So, and then you've got a hole here that you can run like a screwdriver or Allen key or something like that, that you can actually pop it out. Yeah, so as you said, Chris, there's a lot of people out there who use the synth. I used to cast without the synth, and while I could get good stems, sometimes it's a bit of hit and miss. The use of a synth really does improve your consistency to a certain degree, as long as you know what you're doing with it. So as a dry example of how it works is, once you put this part in to your mold and you fill it with resin, then you would sit that actual stem inside just like that, and we'll just tilt that sideways so you can see it. Okay. The actual really big gaps that you can see here allows the air out from the stem as well as the excess resin, because it's going to be pushed out by the stem. And then you can see on this side it would actually form the crucifix whenever it's actually centered properly, equivalent to as if the cap was sitting on top of a switch. So that's the basic function of the synth. There are some things that need to be done in preparation for actually making a cast, but we'll get there as we go along. Now, so here is my silicon mold, okay, and this is the mold that is created using a synth. And you'll see up the top here, there's my 2 rectangular registration holes, there's my 2 square registration holes, and there is the 8 sprues that form. Now, yeah, not a problem, Tsubasa. I'll go through them as we go. Now, with the sprue holes, you'll notice obviously in the actual synth they're just holes. What they recommend is using Q-tips because it's meant to be the right diameter, but in Australia, the Q-tips that I got don't actually fit. I think the size of them is just a little bit off, and that might be a difference between metric and imperial sizes. So it took a little bit of effort of actually, I had to tap them in with like an object to get them. They weren't an easy slot fit, which I was sort of expecting them to be. But at the end of the day, you'll put something in there and you'll end up with these side sprue channels. Okay. Now, I guess we'll talk about the list of supplies because we're kind of at that point. Really, you need a lubricant to work with the synth. Now, I use petroleum jelly, as I've just briefly mentioned. It's just Vaseline. I'll just take a container. It's just straight up good old Vaseline. That's what I use. But you'll find most of the actual people who do use the synth, they actually use a spray. It's a spray release agent, mold release agent. I don't use a spray, not because I don't want to use a spray. I don't use a spray because I don't have anywhere to spray. The downside is, of course, if you spray, you're going to get mist and stuff all over the place. I live in a tiny little apartment and I have a baby. I can't safely spray indoors, and I don't really have anywhere to spray on my balconies either. So I use Vaseline, and that does mean my process is slightly different. So of course, your mileage will vary depending on what you choose to do. What I have here is my 2 resins. Because I'm in Australia, the products that I use are related to what I can get here. I can get smooth-on products, but smooth-on products are actually really expensive here. And instead, I went for a local product just as a play with. This is a opaque plastic resin. It's the stuff that you see here. It's white. The black it's been tinted with black on that particular cap. This one's no good because the actual stem broke removing it from the mold. This is called Craft Cast. It's a 3-minute cure time polyurethane resin. I also use what's called Crystal Cast, which comes from the same guys, and that is a 24-hour clear 2-part epoxy. So that's slightly different, but obviously I'm not going to do that here on the stream because you're not going to get to see the end results. It's just plastic tubs. These are like little yogurt dessert tubs, nothing special about them. Paddle pop sticks, nothing special about that. That's pretty much it. Is there any other questions in regards to the list of supplies that I use, Tsubasa? No? Alright, well, if you got questions, just put them in the chat and I'll answer them, and I'll just keep rolling ahead. So, the first things first is I'm going to put on my gloves. So, I have nitrile gloves here. Nitrile gloves are a little bit better than latex gloves because the actual penetration rate is slower. Now these chems I don't expect to actually penetrate the gloves, but if you're working with solvents, for example, nitrile gloves have a better resistance against solvents for a longer period of time. So that's really what that comes down to. Okay, I'm going to first move some of these things out of the way so I got a bit of space. Move them off the viewing table. Alright, first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to prepare my stem. Now, I had some issues with the actual stem and getting a good alignment because when you put the actual stem in, and this is a known issue, the stem actually rotates. So you'll see there's this little red dot that's up the top here. That's just an incidental bit of resin, but it makes a good marker example. So I'm just going to straighten up. When you wiggle it, you'll see how it moves very slightly. And you can see the entire stem actually rocks back and forth. This looseness is kind of necessary only because of manufacturing and cost. It is necessary because you still have to be able to remove your stem at the end of the day, but to make this actual an affordable item, you do have to have a lower tolerance of manufacture. If you want a super tight fit that fits in perfectly and makes you go, oh, well, it's going to cost a lot, and it makes it a lot less affordable for everyone to actually use. So I had problems because I was having stems that were actually rotated, and if I flip it over, you'll kind of see what I mean by that. I contacted Binge, and his response was to use shims, and he actually apparently uses shims himself. The shims that he uses is clear tape. Now, I've tried a different bunch of tapes that I have available to me just in my household, and none of them worked very well to a certain point, and masking tape was actually the closest fit for me in terms of its thickness. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to actually prepare some masking tape on top of the stem, and you'll see that eventually, maybe, that you'll get a better fit. So this is just a strip of masking tape that I already pre-cut. I'm just going to stick it to the base there, apply a bit of pressure, okay, and you'll see sort of the actual mark that the synth is leaving behind. Okay, I'm just going to roll the front over it, and then I'll just peel that off. And then with my pair of scissors, I can then cut the right length for 4 pieces. It's a bit of a finicky thing to do, and I think this is the part that I hate the most, simply because of the fact that you kind of have to do this every cast that you do. If you don't do it, then obviously you run into the risk that you're going to get misaligned or a wobbly stem, and obviously you don't want that. So I've just gone and stuck that piece of masking tape, as you can see. Okay, so hey there Syntax, thank you very much for joining in. Sweet and sour or hot mustard. I'm actually more of a like an English mustard more than American mustard, but mix that with some tomato sauce and barbecue. Now, all resins are toxic. There is no debate about that at all. Safe to do indoors if you have ventilation. Now, because I'm working with very, very small volumes here, it's relatively okay-ish. If you are working with high volumes and you're doing a lot of casts, so for example, I'm only going to be casting one cat, and that's an acceptable fume hazard and risk for me in this space. I never do multiple casts in the office, and I'm only doing this because of the fact that it's actually in front of my setup here with the camera. Normally when I actually cast, I cast outside, not here as such. Okay, so you do need to have proper ventilation. Having a mask, the mask is a hit and miss because it depends on what kind of mask you have. If you don't have a mask that is actually designed to filter out the specific vapors that the actual resin produces, it serves no purpose. It's as simple as that. So as long as you have a correct respirator that will do the filtering, then you're good to go. But then obviously anybody who's in the same space as you, if they don't have a respirator, then what's the point? So because I'm only literally working with like 3 grams of the stuff, it's a very low risk hazard for the actual space that I'm in. Okay, not a problem. That's exactly why we're here for, to help people out and answer questions. So yeah, let's get back to getting this sorted. So there's that first piece. Let's cut the next 3 pieces and put them on. Now I do apologize that if I need to duck away temporarily if you hear a baby crying or my wife calling, because this is a live stream and real life exists. Now it's actually Australia Day here at the moment, because ordinarily I wouldn't be on and doing a stream on a Thursday, but it's a public holiday. So happy Australia Day to any Australians who might actually be awake at this hour and watching this stream, because I can tell you right now, there's a lot of people who will be sleeping in today. And then there'll be a lot of barbecues and lots of people in parks if the weather's nice. Lots of celebrations, lots of sausages on the barbie, shrimps maybe, some veggie patties for the vegetarians. Okay, I realize that this isn't sort of showing up on the video very well, but I'm still trying to get used to actually doing stuff and putting it in front of the actual camera so you can see what's going on. Oh, I didn't do a good job on that. Let's just peel that, put that on. Okay, so there we kind of have it. Now it's a bit rough, but it's not actually that important, and I'll kind of explain why it's not super important. These, where's my pointer? Okay, so here's my probe. So these side channels here that you can actually see in between the cruciform, in Binge's videos, this is where you need to put some actual lubricant, because this space, if it completely fills up with your resin, is going to lock up this stem, and it's going to make it very, very difficult to get out. So having the actual tape a little bit wider and overlapping isn't a big deal, simply because this space is actually designed to be a vent space, as well as allowing your excess resin and your lubricant to help it come back out. Now, Binge uses a very fine needle tip, kind of like a dispenser, almost like an Eppendorf tip, to fill it. I'm a little bit more crude than that, because I found from my experimentation you can put as much as you want in there and it's fine. So I have a fat tip. It's a 20mm syringe. All the markings have worn off it because it doesn't matter. And what I do is I simply chuck it into the base there, and then I charge her up just like that. And I don't know if that'll show up very well. Will it focus? Will it blend? Alright. If you can see it, the Vaseline just runs straight up the channel and gets to that point. You can kind of see it's a little bit glistening up there, that whitish material. And I'm just going to do that with all the other ones as well. So it just charges it right there. Let's rotate it. Let's charge it up there. And on the other corner. Okay. Now, this is when I start using some of my other tools, because what I want to do is I also want to, and you'll see that I'm doing it on the actual masking tape now, is because the masking tape needs lube too. Otherwise your masking tape is going to absorb the resin and it's going to stick quite horribly as well. Alright, now I'm going to use my probe and I'm just going to smooth that out like so. You know, this is really difficult working further away from your eyes than you're used to because you're trying to keep it on top of the camera. Yeah, if you've never done a live stream and you've never had to work on a camera situation where your head's not like in the way, it's a challenging experience. It really is. Now, this is when things are going to get a little bit tricky and difficult if you're using the Vaseline method, which I am. The reason why people use a spray release material is because it's a very fine mist and it won't mess with your tolerances, and you'll get a good coating, an even coating, which allows your product to turn out well. Because I'm not using that mist and I'm using the Vaseline, I have to ensure that I have the thinnest, smoothest application on where it matters. And where it matters is going to be on this cruciform. Now, if you don't lubricate your cruciform, you may get away with it. You can pop it out and it might not stick. If you don't lubricate, there's also the chance that it will stick and either you're not going to get your stem out, or when you pop out the stem, it'll actually take the piece of resin or epoxy along with this stem insert. And that's exactly what has happened to this. So you'll see that it's got an actual formed base there, and it's even got the start of the actual cruciform there. You can kind of see, maybe. Will that focus close enough? Yeah, okay. So ignoring the bubbles, we'll get to that point later, but you'll see that the cruciform, so when I actually pulled the stem out, it took that chunk of stem with it. Okay, so you do want to actually lubricate if you can, and I'm just going to run a bit of lube there using the Vaseline. It's not very much, you don't need very much at all, and it's a bit of a mess because it's all uneven and it's all blobby and whatnot. But the cool thing is about most lubricants, most oils, is they have an affinity to stick. They want to stick. They want to get in there and they don't want to leave. It's like a tenant who's behind on rent, but he can't afford to go anywhere else. So I just get a bit of my paper, and being economical, I'm just going to tear bits off that I actually need, and I will actually fold my tissue paper, my toilet paper, into a small square, and then I'm going to form a corner with it, and I want this corner here because that's what's going to get into my actual cruciform, and it's going to allow me to take off the excess in the cruciform, which will still leave me with a very fine film of lubricant, but it won't take it all off because the lubricant's sticky. The lubricant wants to stay and it has an affinity for the metal and the surface. Okay, okay, so the cruciform is prepared. So let's just put that aside. Now we have to lubricate the actual synth itself. The lubrication is a little bit simpler. So once again, with my trusty Vaseline syringe, first thing I do is I actually fill in that maker's mark. I don't have a maker's mark, so rather than having a space there, I just fill it in. You don't have to. And then I put a big fat blob on the top, and I put a couple of blobs on the side, just like that. Okay, and I go back to my trusty probe. You don't have to lubricate the sides. You don't have to do what I'm doing right now, which is to basically just have to get the angle right, is to just smooth it out. But I find that it's easier to clean your synth afterwards if you do, because any of the excess lube that, excess resin that you have, it will want to actually stick to the synth. The synth, if you've never actually handled one, by the way, while it's machined, it's not highly polished. So this actual surface, it has a texture. I don't know if you can hear it. And it's the machining texture on it, and the resins will stick to it. I don't know if that's for all synth or if it's just my synth, but from the pictures I've seen, you know, a lot of people do have these sort of machining marks, and that's fairly typical because once again, it comes down to cost. You know, they could have had this highly polished, but it would have cost a lot more. Now, once I've done the outsides, I start doing the walls. So I'm just gonna do the side walls here, which is that part there. That's the raised platform. So I just give it a bit of a lube. Whoop, nearly dropped it. It's really hard working further away from your body. And then I basically smooth out and spread my Vaseline on top, and then down the actual sides as well. Now, my brand of caps, my artisan brand, is called Roughest Guts. I don't claim to be a high-end artisan maker. I make caps, I make artisans because I enjoy the process and I like to share my products. I don't have a lot of sales, I don't charge a lot of money for it, and it's very Australian to, you know, be a bit on the rough side sometimes. This country is founded on convicts, and I think we've done pretty well, all things considering. And I've come to this country as an immigrant, and you know, I feel very Australian, especially on Australian Day, because I've integrated into the country and I appreciate it for everything that it's got, and yeah, lets me have a great life. So my caps, and you'll see the way that I'm working is very carefree in a sense. I'm not trying to make super high-end, you know, caps that are ever going to compete with, say, the likes of, you know, Booper and Binge and stuff like that. I just want to make good quality caps that people will like. The way that I've just gone and lubricated this top means the inside surface of my caps are going to be rough because the actual lubricant is not flat and smooth. Had I used a spray lubricant, then it would actually be even and then be a great fine coat, and it would be nice, even and smooth. So this adds texture to the inside of my cap. Okay, so if you do end up doing it like this, you need to be aware of that. If you don't want that, then you need to give it a light wipe down so it's smooth, or use the spray. When we get to the other side, you need to lubricate the actual inside of the stem. So all I'm doing is just running the lube on the inside of the stem, as well as the inside of the stem. Well, now I'm just going to put a bit more. Okay, so there's my Vaseline. And I'm just going to run around. The cool thing is, right, for most part, you don't actually have to be that precise because it doesn't affect how the cap functions. Sure, it affects how the cap looks on the underside, but it doesn't affect the actual sculpt, the actual artisan component of it. Yes, you can argue and say, look, you're not giving quality of care, and I know that I've copped a bit of flack in the past from the community because of the fact that, you know, I'm not putting in a lot of effort. But hey, I do this primarily because I enjoy making caps, like I said, and if you don't like what I have, you don't have to buy it. I'm not taking advantage of you. I'm not taking your money and ripping off. I'm not making promises at all on anything that it's going to be that it's not. So, yeah, everything with a grain of salt, please. So I actually lubricate the outside here because the overflow of your resin can also come out. No, this lube goes everywhere. Everywhere on the synth and then some. And this is really important, and the reason why that the lube goes everywhere is because it makes cleanup so easy. Vaseline is super cheap. It's like $3 for a tub, and I've barely gone anywhere with this. So I'm going to lubricate the outside of this, and I have to lubricate the inside of these sprues, inside these actual holes as well. The reason for that is, if you don't, it's a pain to get the actual resin that's stuck in there. Now when you use a spray, because the spray is an area spray, it gets inside. So they don't really talk about that you need to lubricate in here because it naturally just goes inside when you have a spray. I learnt that the hard way because I didn't lubricate in here when I started using this because I wasn't using a spray. It got stuck and it was a bitch to push it all out. So, okay, so now I've just gone and lubed it all. I'm gonna flip it over on this side, and that's pretty much it. Okay, I'm just gonna clean that surface again just by giving a flat scrape. Right, try and get it nice and even. And of course, because I don't want to contaminate my working surface, I can sit it sideways and it'll sit up just fine. I'm just going to clean the excess off just like that. Now Vaseline is relatively safe. You know, it's just petroleum jelly. It's not going to kill you or harm you. Really, it's only the resin that's going to be the problem. Now we get to the exciting part, or not so exciting depending on who you are. If you're finicky with working with chems, so let's just clear some spaces. So I have this tub. I've had spills before, obviously, and for example, I was transferring dye from the bottles that they came in into dropper bottles, and I had a spill. So that's what all these marks are like. Thankfully, the dyes aren't toxic and they don't give off any particular nasty fumes. But this stuff is toxic, and you don't want it going everywhere if you can avoid it. Where can you find my keycaps and lubing with my fingers? My fingers are fat fingers. They're not going to get in. Lubing with fingers is actually less even because the fingerprints, when you actually push across, will leave very fine trails. Because the actual probe is smooth metal, it's rounded metal, it's rolled metal, when I drag it across, it actually produces a much more even surface finish on the lube, if that makes any sense. And for you, Syntax, where can you find my keycaps? Good question. I have a whole pile of crappy caps here. There are some floating around. I haven't actually had a keycap sale for a while now. My baby came along almost 9 months ago, and since then I haven't done a lot of actual crafting. I've been doing a bit of sewing lately, only just because it's a lot easier and faster and safer to use a sewing machine than to do any casting. So I've been making sleeves, yeah. But let's keep on rolling. Yeah, and also because if you do, like Syntax says, you know, if you use your fingers, you've either got to clean your fingers or you've got to change gloves because you don't want to try and get, you know, stuff all over the place. Especially if you're handling chems, because then you don't want cross-contamination, you don't want the bottle to slip and so forth. So this is part B. Okay, I don't want to tilt it too far because they're not actually watertight lids on these things, because it's just a simple squeezy bottle. You'll see that a lot of the actual chem is dropped out of solution. It's Australia here, so you know, stuff gets hot, it gets warm. It's not surprising if stuff does actually evaporate and crash out of solution. Hey, Vape Wizard, how's it going? Thank you very much for joining. First time here, not a problem, because this is the first time I've ever done a live stream. So we're both first timers in this situation. So I'm just going to clean off the bottle there just in case I had anything. I'm just going to wipe my hands in case I got any Vaseline accidentally. Now I do have a bin next to me, so it's convenient for me just to ditch the stuff that you can't see on the camera. So I've got my part A and part B little cups. They're just like 30ml dispensing cups. You can pick them up easily online or stuff like that, or you can even use shot glasses and things like that. It doesn't really matter. I have pipettes. They're just little 3ml pipettes, and because they've got clear gradients on it, I've just marked it with pen so I know where the 0.5 ml, 1 ml, 1.5 ml markings are. Okay, and I've also, as I said earlier, in case you weren't here at the start, is for ease and also, you know, just to try and reduce the number of errors that you make while you cast, I actually mark my pipettes and my containers and my actual chem bottles with the color of the material. So this is part B, it's an orange stuff. The written description is orange, the pipette label is orange, and the actual written bit on the side of that is also orange. Well, it's not the first time I've been on a live stream, but it's my first live stream, if you really want to look at it that way. So I'm just going to undo the top of that. Let's just take the cap off. You can see these bottles are cheap, horrible, nasty little things, and they're not watertight, so you don't really want to knock these over if you can. So, and you'll see there is the part B craft. Alright, so I'm going to squeeze out some air so I've got a bit of negative pressure. And then I'll put some into that. And then back inside my tub, so if I have a spill, it's contained within the tub. And then I wipe off the excess. Into the bin that goes. Cap goes back on. Now, if you were doing a whole series of casts, then obviously you could put as much as you want. You could have all your molds laid out if you've got multiple synths. From what I've been told, I believe Binge actually runs 12 synths in his collection. There might be a couple of different variations and versions of them, which allows him to do that. So here is my part A, and as I said, I've labeled it purple. The pipette is purple, the actual container is purple. So I'm not going to make the mistake of mixing the wrong stuff with the wrong container, with the wrong pipette, because then it's going to fill it up. Now these are cheap disposable. I bought a box of 500 of them for like $18 on the internet. So it doesn't matter if I make a mistake because I can chuck it, but in terms of convenience factor, because it doesn't actually damage or ruin the pipette, you know, I'm Asian. What can I say? 50 cents here, 50 cents there. You're going to have $1. Think of the things you can do with $1. Alright, so let's just put some part A into my mold as well. Oh, sorry, into my little squeezy bottle spaces. So I've got some part A. Put that inside. Alright, so let's clean up the excess. Yeah, so for you, Vape Wizard, I've been making artisan caps for about a year now, but I was doing it the traditional method and I was getting a lot of hit and miss. So investing in the synth, I think, was a really good idea for me because I didn't have to worry about trying to get good stems. It was really just the alignment issue that I was finding was a problem. So now that I have a sort of workaround because Binge had told me about using shims, and I've got sort of masking tape put on the edges to act as shims to make it a bit tighter and firmer, then we're pretty much good to go. Take my dollar to the dollar store. Yeah, we don't have dollar stores here in Australia. We used to have $2 stores. Like Japan has Hyakuyen stores, which is the 100 yen stores. But these days, we actually have Daiso here. It's a Japanese company, and they sell a lot of stuff for like $2.80. That's their promise. So this is just like a little sort of desserty container, and you can actually see the drips from all of my previous runs solidifying there, and it's sort of turned into a little cool stalagmite, because they hang on tight, as opposed to stalagmites who grow upwards with all their might. It's a little bit dusty because I haven't cast for a little bit, and I'm just going to wipe out the dust there. Not that the dust really affects it. Okay, and just to, so this is just pure white. You'll see over this container I've actually got all sorts of funky colors because that's my color mixing one. I'll put it in, I'll mix it up, and then I apply it to my mold. And so in this mold I've actually pre-filled the hand portion of the mold. To explain what this actual cast is, this is the Danzi cast. It's a little hand in a martial art pose. Let's see if I can get that to focus. Yeah, so that's just a bad munted cap. Anyway, it was one of my early trials, and you can see sort of here are some just complete solids to check out. Oh, that's my Firefly one that I did as well. And the hand pose, it kind of looks like that. So, you might see it in martial arts films where the guy's got his hand out and he's just like, oh, like that. That's what that pose is. So I've actually already pre-filled that. And the reason why I've pre-filled that is because it sets in 3 minutes, but they say that you want to leave it for 15 minutes before you pop it out. And so by pre-filling that, at least firsthand, I'm going to save a bit of wait time for you guys to actually see an end result. So I'm just going to clean that out, make sure that I can try and get a good contact to contact, because ordinarily I would just cast straight on top of it and then I wouldn't have to worry. But for the purposes of that, I've just done that precast. Okay, so everything at this point you want in place, because you've only got 3 minutes, and 3 minutes is a very short period of time. I can tell you right now, it's a very short period of time. And 3 minutes is at room temperature as well. The hotter your work environment is, the faster your chemicals will react. It's just how the laws of physics are. For every 10 degrees, it's an order of magnitude faster in reaction time. And what I mean by that is, if it takes like 10 minutes to do something, then 10 degrees hotter will be potentially a reaction rate at 5 minutes. Now that's a bit of an exaggeration because order of magnitudes don't work exactly like that, but that's just an example of what I mean. So you might get 3 minutes at room temperature, but at 35 degrees, you might get 1.5 minutes of work time. Okay? So I like to have everything set up where it needs to be, which will make it easier for me to actually work with. So, hey look, I can give my desk, oh no, a face. Bit of a smiley face. Actually, it's quite funny because you probably can't hear it, but my baby's outside giggling and having a good time. Let's get some casting. So I'm going to measure out my part A and then my part B's, and we should be good to go. I'm going to use 1 mil for this. So I'm going to draw it up to my 1 mil mark, get rid of the excess, and there's my 1 mil. Okay. Now any excess I generally actually put back into the containers, or I'll dump it into just like a waste kind of container and then let that cure out as well. Yeah, if you can do it in a walk-in cooler, that would be really cool. No pun intended, sorry. One of the problems also that I tend to encounter, and if you listen to Binge when he was on Top Clack and they were talking about making artisans, is that moisture in the air is an absolute killer. Humidity ruins casts. So if you're working in a high humidity area, expect to have problems because, and this is one of the reasons why I actually get bubbles. It's because moisture has been absorbed into my resin and in the environment in general. Australia is quite humid relatively to a lot of other countries. It's even worse, of course, as you get closer to the equator. And when the actual resin starts to cure and it's chemically mixing and reacting, it forms little vapor bubbles from the moisture it's absorbed. And that's why you get those bubbles. And so if you can work in a cooler because all the moisture is basically getting, crashed out as mist and vapor and you can pump it out or whatnot, then that would be fantastic. In fact, Binge, I believe he mentioned in his Top Clack episode that he has an air conditioner for his garage to try and drop the humidity and the temperature down as low as possible, but in summer it's very, very difficult for him to do that very well. Alright, so there's part A. Now let's get our part 2, part B pipette, and let's draw up a mil. Now this actual resin that I'm working with, this polyurethane that I'm working with, is a 1-to-1. If you don't have a 1-to-1, I would recommend that you pre-measure into separate containers the actual ratio that you need so that you're not stressed for time trying to get the right ratio before you have to do your mixing shenanigans. So there's my other mil, and in it goes, and let's start our timing. Now I'm meant to get 3 minutes of work time, and they say to stir for 20 seconds, so it's 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000, 11,000, 12,000, 13,000, 14,000, 15,000, 16,000, 17,000, 18,000, 19,000, 20,000. Is that well mixed? Is it evenly mixed? I'm not sure. It's very hard to tell with these. So let's just put that aside. And then I'm just going to pour that straight in. And you'll see that it actually fills up quite high, but that's kind of to be expected. And I'm just going to put that aside. And this is where I do a bit of tapping of the actual mold. and that helps to get some of those bubbles up and out, maybe sometimes. Now with this stuff, it starts to turn white when it starts to cure. So I kind of have like a, oh crap, it's about to happen moment, and then that's when things go into action much faster. But I'm not going to wait for that. Now there's a lot of bubbles here at the moment, but I was kind of expecting that. So we're just going to go and do it anyway because it doesn't matter. This is just an example of how to cast. I'm not looking for an actual awesome product coming out of it. So make sure, because it's got the rectangulars and the squares, right, it's going to fit into the correct orientation. If it doesn't fit, don't force it because you've probably got it the wrong way around. And just going to push that down, and you'll see that up the center stem, and then slowly through the actual outsides, the resin has actually welled up into the sprues as they should have. Okay, then we're just going to get our stem and we're going to pop it in. Now the stem also, because it's a rectangular shape, only has one orientation it can go, which, well, sorry, it's got two orientations, but as in it's a left and right. So you'll see how it took a lot of force for me to actually push that in, and that's because of the shims. Without the shims, it would have just fallen in. Okay, so it's nice and in, and you'll see now how much has actually come out through those sprue holes. And this is why you want to lubricate the top, because when that hardens, if you don't have the lubrication on the top on this side, it would actually be a pain to get off. And it is a pain. I have had to do it before. The other thing about having the excess means that when you push down like I did, you're still going to have enough to be able to create your cap without forming big pockets and voids inside the actual mold. Okay, and now we play the waiting game. Is it going to refocus? It's going to refocus. Hello? Where's my eyes? Is it going to detect the eyes? Go for the eyes, boo. No, it doesn't want to. Alright, let's see if I can get that to focus. And then let's just slowly bring that down. Am I selling my artisans? I have had sales in the past. I won't say that I'm the most successful or the most respected artisan maker out there. I do have friends who do like and appreciate the artisans that I make, and that's always nice. Making them for yourself definitely is expensive. But the investment, the capital investment, is not that bad in the sense of how much materials you have. So, you know, for a kilogram of resin, you're looking anywhere between $40, $50, $80, $100. For the synth itself, it was like $100, something thereabouts. You know, odds and ends, maybe $50 here and there. Modeling clay, you know, relatively cheap, $10, $15 for a small block in a craft store. Lego bricks, you know, you can probably get away with about $200, $250 to start with. Silicon, oh, so you can see it's starting to go milky now. Maybe I'll just lift that up so you can see it. Yeah, the bottom corners are going milky. It's starting to cure. So it wasn't actually that long. Wasn't that long at all. So, you know, $200, $300 will actually get you started with materials. And it's not even a small amount of materials, because with 500 grams, you can potentially make like 50, 60, 70 caps easy. You know, with a kilogram, you can make hundreds of caps potentially, depending on the size of your cap and the sculpt that you make. I'm thankful that I've been able to actually recover my costs in the sales that I have had. The biggest problem for me is because I live in Australia, selling my caps, I'm at a disadvantage since shipping overseas is always very expensive. Now, I know that there are guys, for example, Cos, with Cos caps. He offers really great shipping rates. I'm very jealous because he has a great working relationship with his local post office. Our postal system here is kind of like a semi-franchised system, which means local post offices, depending on how big and small, they can run at their own policies because they get charged the cost of the actual shipping as well. So My guys, they're sticklers for rules. I can't ship stuff that he can at the same price. And I've had bad experiences with parcels disappearing as well, being shipped from here. So using tracked shipping gives me peace of mind and also for the buyer, but it means it's also more expensive. So, but you know, we'll have to see what happens in the future. And now you can see it's really gone quite white, and it's actually still quite soft. If I get my round nose, so let's bring that into focus. Maybe, will it focus? Will it blend? All right, so you can see I'm just poking it and it's leaving dents in it. It's because it hasn't fully hardened, and it will take actually quite a while. So, you know, I'm happy to Q&A and just rab it on as that hardens. Focus hacks, yeah. So who was it? It was Hyperjerk, I believe, that actually said to put the eyes on a surface that you wanted it to focus on. He said actually draw it on your thumbs. So when you actually hold it up like an object, it will focus on the plane that your thumbs are at. And I thought that was actually pretty funny. That was pretty cool. Unfortunately, I don't really want to draw on my thumbs every time I do a video. And I don't know where it went. I had a paddle pop stick actually that I'd just drawn some eyes on to play with to see how it would work. And it was a bit of a bother because I'd have to hold up like the stick and the object, and it wasn't really working very well. Hey, how's it going? White 025, programming your Minorca. Now, I would actually love to be able to build a Minorca. I don't have a 40% keyboard at the moment, and after our episode with Alex at Pank and Evans from Minivans, Alex being the maker of the Minorca and Seabright, I was like, I'm super interested. So maybe when I have a bit of spare cash that I can put forward and actually get a Minorca, I'll be able to build one, hand wire one, and yeah, I'll get to your stage of programming. Programming. Now while we wait and I rab it on, I'm just going to put the excess into something else. So this is just an excess, one of my older molds. It's just like a rubbish mold, I guess is probably the best way of describing it. And you can see I just randomly do crap and it just ends up being something different, unusual. The only thing about pouring off excess is you still need to get the right ratio, because if you don't get the right ratio, it doesn't cure properly, and then you're going to end up with a sticky goop, and that's no good because then you just got to chuck it out. So I always have a look at what I've got least of, and we kind of go from there. So I've got about just under 2 mil of part A. I'm going to pop that back in. And then how much have I got of my part B? So part B is just under 1.5 mil, thereabouts. Alright, so let's put 1.5 mil into there. Let's get rid of the extra 0.5 mil of my part A. Dump that in. Get my white mixing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Alright. And then let's just pour out the excess. Let that fill up. Hook that back over so it can drip safely into some space. Let's spread this guy out. Okay, and now we wait for that to harden up as well. 40% are the best. Got a minivan and a Minorca. Oh wow, Dallas giveaway. Fantastic. Congratulations. Very lucky. I know that they did that hand wiring thing on TopClack last week, and they gave away one of those boards as well, which would have been pretty cool, but unfortunately I was actually at work because Australian US times are a bit of a pain, and it's time shifted. I was actually on holidays when I was on the TopClack episode, and that was actually the only way I could make it. So now we've had a couple of minutes, and you can see that when I press on it, it's still deforming, but it's hard to see because the focus isn't great. Can I get it to focus a bit closer? There we go. Alright, so you can see I'm pushing on it and it's not leaving as much of a dent. And you can see the micro bubbles that I'm talking about. So these bubbles are formed both from the mixing as well as the humidity that's in the air. What do I prefer, blanks or sculpted artisans? I'm very utility, so I actually prefer, if I'm going to have an artisan, it's going to be a sculpted artisan. Don't get me wrong, I like blanks, I appreciate blanks, but as you can see my keyboard here, my Philco, it's straight up black. At home, it's not a problem. In the office, it's not a problem. No one's going to complain about it. But in terms of aesthetics, a sculpted artisan has its own place because it is an individual item. But if you have a artisan blank, if it just sits there by itself, it draws attention, but then you look at it and it's like, it seems a lot more out of place because of the fact that it's got the same shape as a normal keycap. But that's just how I feel. I know many people love blanks, and there's some amazing blanks out there. Cos has done some amazing blanks. Bus Gamer with his mate Idea 23 are doing some amazing blanks. The Jelly Keys have some really cool stuff as well. Arrow Keys. There's a lot of really nice blanks, but it's just not me. Simple as that. Vape Wizard, in regards to the Gherkin 30%, I'm actually getting a Gherkin. I'm getting a Gherkin because it's cheaper than the Minorca, and that's going to be one of my future builds as well. So I'm very excited for that group buy. Jolly Green Giant actually is acting as my proxy, so I managed to convince 2 of my friends to actually get Gherkins as well. So he's bundling it all up and shipping across just to save on the international shipping. Once I do get it, I hope to do a video on, the actual PCB, sort of like an unpackaging like I did with the Ergodox group buy. And then I'm not sure if I'll actually do a stream of the soldering and building of it, but I certainly will do a video of my final end product, maybe about the programming or anything like that if I had difficulties. We'll have to wait and see. Now, the other week I put up that video also in regards to the introduction to making keycap sets and doing cases and plates, as well as making your own PCB as sort of like well, not really advertising, I guess, but just a forecast. I want to do a video on using KiCad or KiCad or however you want to pronounce it, the PCB making thing. And the reason was I'm familiar with using Keyboard Layout Editor and using the plate and case builder. I've used it quite a few times, quite a lot, and obviously I've played around with making key sets, but I've never made my own PCB. And so I thought I have to put my money where my mouth is, and I went and started playing with it. And you may have seen on our mechanical keyboards actually 2 days ago or yesterday, I can't remember exactly which day I put it up, but I was asking about getting my footprint component libraries, the folders, to actually be correct, as well as what components I should be loading, because the guide that I'd posted, I'm not going to say that it's out of date, but things may have changed, which means there are some minor inconsistencies in regards to parts and things like that. And so I do want to do a video just covering my experiences of using the guide as well as KiCad in general, and so anybody who's designing a PCB or wants to get into designing a PCB at least will be aware of the pitfalls that I fell into, similarly to how I talked about on my Ergodox build, and then therefore they're less likely to get frustrated or confused in regards to when they come to making their own PCB. So now I've got a $0.5 mil or so excess of part A, so we're just going to pop that back in. At this point, I certainly do not want to spill, because if I have a spill, it's going to be pretty catastrophic. There you go. Go back into your home where you came from. So help me. So help me. Alright. Anybody excited for Incredibles 2? I know I am. It's been many, many years in the making. Incredibles. Alright, so let's just take that out. Let's put that back on. So what are you guys up to, wherever you are? I know that Second Music is over in France, and I'm assuming the majority of you guys are probably overseas in the US. I don't know if any of you guys are locally here in Australia, but it's early yet. I think, what's the time over here? Oi, wake up. My watch says it is 9:01. Fantastic. People are starting to probably rouse and get ready to go forth and whatnot. While we're still waiting for that to harden up, here's another mold also made with the synth, and this is the Firefly that I designed. The Firefly as the bug, not as the science fiction series. So here's another Dunzi that I'd done earlier, but with the blue cast. There's a shot of that. Will it focus? Yeah. So you can see the pitting and bubbles and whatnot. And what happened on this one was the... Come on, you bastard. Focus. You gonna do it? No. Alright, well, you can't see it super well, but the actual stem cracked and broke when I took the stem out of it as well. But as I was holding up accidentally, not quite accidentally, there is the actual mold test cast. Oi, focus. It's almost like talking to a baby. Focus over here. Of the actual Firefly without any coloring in it. I think it looks alright. It's pretty cool, but the challenge is actually getting it to get the color and dye where you want it. And here is actually a test cast of the Movember cap that I'd actually done last year with COS, fundraising for Movember Foundation. So there's the Mo, and it's just a couple layers of junk resin going into it and filling out the back as well. Alright, I think we've waited enough. Let me just put some of this away. Oh, great. Thank you very much for tuning in from UK and Texas, Vancouver, Sweden. Man, that's awesome. I didn't realize Ontario, Canada. Oh, I actually have my godparents are in Vancouver. So I've been to Vancouver twice now. I've been to Calgary once, went out to Drumheller to the Dino Museum there, which was pretty awesome. I've been to Saskatoon in Saskatchewan for the Canadian National Archery Championships back in 2011. But I have not ventured any further east than that. I haven't been to the UK except for Heathrow Airport on my way through to a conference in Budapest when I was doing my PhD back in the day. So I would like to go to the UK. That would be really nice. My wife's been to the UK on holiday, but sadly I haven't. Okay, so let's hope that this has hardened enough. So I'm just going to do another poke test, and we'll see the fruits of the labor. It's still a bit soft, but you know, I don't want to drag this out and make you guys wait excessively long. So I won't make any promises that the actual stem will not break. So if it does break, at least I told you that there's a chance that it's going to break. Now I have a set of good quality Allen keys here. I'm very sad because I actually had my 3/32 stolen from me when I was in the shop, because I used to work in an archery shop, and it's one of the more common Allen keys that you use. Unfortunately, it got nicked. Bit unfortunate. And the size that fits through that perfectly is a 964. The 964 is a good size, and you need something long. You don't want something short, and you don't want something that's going to be thin, because it will make it difficult for leverage. And if it's thin and not strong, unlike these Allen keys, the metal that it's made with is, you will bend it. Somebody actually put up a post of their screwdriver that they bent trying to take their stem out. And the reason was because they hadn't lubed it properly and it got stuck. So in the end, they, I think, heated it up and then had to chip away at all the bits of plastic to get it off. Alright, so now you'll notice that I've actually still left it in the silicone only because I want to give it as much time as possible to cure against the shape. Whereas if the stem's going to break, it's going to break. This is only a live cast to show you the process rather than trying to get something out at the end. So 2 thumbs, hands against it, and here we go. Oh, and it came up, and beautiful. Look at that. The stem came out, no problems, and you'll see a bit of the Vaseline came with it. It moved nice and easy. I'm very happy with that. And now let's get that focus. You'll see that lovely crucifix in the middle and all of this horrible spudgy side on the side. Now we go back to the wood carving tools, okay, my flat edge, and we start cutting all of this off. Oh, it's not focusing. Come on. My apologies. Oi, right here. Right here. There's eyes. What's going on? Alright, let's try going from up here. Lead the camera down. Lead the camera down. You can do it. Good camera. This is where using webcams is not really the best medium, but I don't have the money to get like a HD camcorder kind of thing. It's certainly something that I would love to be able to afford to get at some point. Not only could I use it for streams, but I could also, record videos of my baby. But hey, we'll just have to live with what we got. So it was out of focus, but I've basically just started cutting off at the sprues, and you'll see, I don't want to lift it too high and get the focus in the wrong plane again, that I'm just cutting through the sprues that are coming up, the excess that came up, so it just trims off just like that, okay? And you'll see now the whole thing is starting to sort of wobble because it's actually held in by the side bits in here. And I'm going to shift to my smaller straight edge, okay? And I'll just run on the inside and it will actually cut and trim off the support bits that weld up. So I'm just cutting through all the corners and pop, there it goes. And you'll see that this bit has these legs. They're the bits of the polyurethane that went up these side channels that I was talking about in between the synth. So if you didn't have that, it would be really hard to get this stem out, for one, and two, you wouldn't be able to get all that air and all the bubbles and all that excess out. And yeah, it's a really good design. I'm like super impressed at the way that they went about designing it, and it works really well. Now, one of my tricks to getting a smooth stem back actually is because the synth is really well designed in the fit. And so I get my fat edge and it's actually wider than the stem hole. So what I do is I actually use it as a guide to clean up the back surface of that stem. So I'm just scraping all of that out. Just gonna ditch the excess. So I don't know if that's gonna come up very well. So you see there's all that stuff and it's not making a beautiful circular shape, and the top surface of the actual cruciform is a bit rough at the moment. You're gonna focus down here? Oi, oi. Come on, bring yourself down, bring yourself down, bring yourself down. Okay. So what then I do is, because the actual width of the blade is bigger than the circle hole, I can actually use the outside of that channel to act as just like a height guide to get even heights, and I will just trim and push to get that evenness that I'm after. I can see it's got a bit of a bubble defect on there, but that is not a problem. Okay. So we're pretty much ready for it to pop out now, and then we can see the fruits of this this disastrous labour. Oh, congratulations, R. White. Happy birthday. Welcome, Ryan. Irish, awesome. Now we've just popped that out, and check it out. There is a grey Dunza. Right, so let's bring that up. Get that to focus if it will. There's a grey. And you can see all the bubbles. And yeah, I didn't really take the care to try and get out the bubbles. I didn't mix it super carefully. It has absorbed a lot of moisture in the air because we are in summer. I mean, the humidity in my apartment got to like 50-something% on my hygrometer the other day just before the storms hit. And while this is up here and you've kind of got focus, you can see, kind of got focus, maybe. You can see the actual white bits, which are the sprues that allows all that excess resin and the air to get out. So there shouldn't be any big fat bubbles, which we don't have. Obviously, if you have a slower curing resin, you'll get much better results because there's more time for the bubbles to come up to the surface and actually get out of the mold. With my 24-hour stuff, I can spend 10 minutes tapping and getting those bubbles up, and then scraping them off and removing them before I pop that in, because it doesn't gel for about 15 minutes. With this, it's 3-minute work time. It doesn't work. I basically shot it and that's it. And you can see that's the inside of the actual mold, and the silicone has stained from the various colors that I've actually sort of run through it. Okay. Now at this point, you're like, well, how do we get this off? The way that Binge shows it in his video is he gets a knife and then he actually cuts the actual sprues. He separates the sprues and then he uses something down the back and he pushes it out. I've done both methods, and it depends on how loose something is and how well it's lubed. Is it this one? Okay, so in his Instagram video that he's got somewhere, he talks about something with the appropriate girth, and the appropriate girth is a 3/16 width will fit the actual stem insert on the back. Okay, and that's what you can use to push it out with if you want to. This is still quite soft, so if I actually tried to push it out, it would actually deform the back of that stem and crucifix and therefore ruin the work that we've just done. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do the cut, but I'm actually going to lift it from the platform without pushing from the back. So using my wood cutting knife, I'm just going to get in on that edge and chop, chop. I'm just going to chop that. We're going to get across, cut that, cut that. Get across and cut that, cut that, cut that, and then the final side in the middle and on the corner. Watch out for your fingers. And because I've lubed it really well, now Syntax said earlier, geez, is there anywhere that I'm not putting lube? But the reason is because I can now pull that out. If I didn't put that much lube in, it would be a lot more stuck and I would have to pop it out. I'd have to wait for it to fully harden and pop it out. And you'll see the sprues are filling in the channel, and as predicted, we've got a lot of visible tiny bubbles. If it'll focus. Come on. You can do it. There we go. So you can see all those bubbles because I mixed it quite vigorously, and yeah. But if you look past the bubbles, it's actually quite a smooth-ish surface, all things considering. And there's the cruciform. And if I get a switch tester, So here's a my Cooler Master switch tester with the top ray switch bunged out of it. I can put that on top of a switch, and there you go. And it's actually fairly straight because I've put the shims on it. It's fairly straight, and the cap has enough snug that on normal force it just won't fall off, although I don't know if it'll flick off. It might flick off, yeah, so it's flicking off by itself. The cap actually, as it hardens, it shrinks, so it's going to get a little bit tighter. How much tighter depends on the individual resins. My 24-hour stuff shrinks quite a lot compared to the 3-minute stuff, but the 3-minute stuff still shrinks a little bit. The other thing is, if you've applied too much lube to the stem and you've got a fat layer on it, then that's where your tolerances are, and that is why a lot of people who use this say that you really should be using a spray instead of a wipe-on. Now, what you'll also notice here is that my bit of masking tape that I put on as a shim has actually peeled up, and that's why I'm saying it's a pain, because you have to go and clean it and reset and apply shims every time. So when you consider all these labor costs in, plus if you're doing fancy stuff like Binge does with, you know, photochromatics, that stuff's not necessarily super cheap. The time is the cost. For him to charge $70 to do those amazing casts that he does, and you know, I'm not kissing his ass for no reason, but the man makes amazing caps. And the price, really, if you want to think about it, is well justified by the time. Now, you've seen me do a cast right now, and this was a 3-minute set time, 15-minute roughly cure, and we're running 122 minutes. Now, I know that I did a lot of talking that wasn't actually absolutely necessary for casting, but it still takes a bit of time to do one cap. Now, if you have a good setup and everything's running smoothly, you can do a whole bunch of them in a row, but it's still a lot of time. Now, because I've lubed this really well inside each of these sprue channels, check out, I've got a screwdriver bit and push. It's out. All these bits just come out just like that, and then dust them off, and I'm ready to go again. If I hadn't, then it can take a considerable amount of force and effort to get those sprue bits out. Alrighty, so that is how you cast using a synth, or maybe I should rephrase that to, that is how I cast using a synth. Your own results will change. They will be different depending on what you choose, what medium you work with, you know, what your resins are, what lubricant that you work with, you know, if you're going to use clear tape, shims, masking tape, whatever, right? Ryan, you want to make some plain DSA caps with a mold? Would you recommend this as a hobby? I'm biased. I will say I would recommend it as a hobby simply because it's one of my hobbies. And that's why I'm streaming this. It does take time and investment. If you plan on making them just for fun and you can afford the time and the money, go for it. If you can do it safely, if you've got a workshop, if you've got a garage, if you've got a well-ventilated space, there is no reason why you can't. If you make really good-looking DSA profile caps, people will buy them. If you price them right, you know, $5, $8, $10, $15 is well within normal price on the market for blanks. Artisans, you know, new artisans starting out, once again, $5, $10, $15, $20, not unusual. Some of the better ones starting out even go as high as $30, and it's well justified for some, maybe not for others. More established makers, $30, $50, $60, $70 to $80, you know, it's all out there. But that's only if you want to go down that path and try and make money. I don't do this for the purposes of trying to make money. I do this because I want to offer different designs that I've created, that I like, that other people haven't. Your room as a workshop, as long as you've got ventilation and you've got a space that's big enough that you can work with, that's not going to be hazardous for yourself or other people, perfectly fine. Ventilation is very important. Ventilation is very important. This is the second bedroom of our unit. It's a 3 meter by 3 meter, so you're looking at what, like a 9 by 9 foot, and it's got a window. I can open it, it has ventilation. It's fine for doing a small number of casts or a small cast like this, as long as there's air moving. If you're going to do a lot, and depending on the actual resin you're working with, you probably should use a bigger space. But once again, it's up to you and the risks that you're willing to take as part of your hobbies. So that's pretty much it when it comes down to casting with a cat. And I guess, yeah, bit of Q&A if anyone actually has any other questions. I'll just keep on cleaning and looking. Excuse me if my voice is fading in and out because I'm putting stuff off camera, off screen. Syntax, tuned in for the info and great tips on the keyboard related, being an awesome source. Oh, thank you very much. Comments like that, you know, it really does make it worthwhile to take the time and effort. For those who somehow have actually magically made it to this channel and are not actually aware, I do a weekly podcast called The Board Podcast. You can find us at www.theboardpodcast.com. It will redirect you to our website within Libsyn, which is where our podcasts are hosted, and we have a weekly podcast just on stuff all over the mechanical keyboard community. Have I used any of the casting kits on Amazon? The answer is no. The reason why the answer is no is because in Australia we don't get a lot of Amazon products easily or cheaply. We don't have next day prime shipping for stuff besides, you know, books, DVDs, that kind of thing. They don't have a massive Amazon warehouse in Australia yet, and a lot of Amazon sellers also won't sell to overseas, which, you know, if you don't live overseas, it's something that you never really think about. How do I make the molds? So, Nicholas, I actually didn't make the mold in this stream, so you didn't actually miss that. And the reason why I didn't was because it's 24 hours for my silicon to actually cure. I don't actually have, I do have a different cap, so I'll just go over it again quickly. So here's just a sculpt on top of a OEM cap, okay? If you were to actually build a mold box for it, you would put it in the middle of the box, you would put your walls together, you would mix your silicon, and so, for example, this is the silicon that I use, Craftsil, okay? It's a 2-part, 1 to 20 of silicon. You mix it up, you tap out the bubbles if you can. If you've got a vacuum chamber, you can chuck it in and actually suck out the air. If you don't, then, you know, you just got to live with it and deal with it. And because it's sitting in your mold box, you pour in the first half, and that will form an impression of the top of the cap, okay? Once that cures, so that's 24 hours for me, you flip it over, you take the base off your actual mold box off, but you leave the cap inside because you want to be able to capture the actual stem. And this is the traditional way of making it. If you don't do the traditional and you use the synth, because the cap actually sits on the synth, so let me get the synth again. Alright. So with the synth, the cap sits on top, like that. You still form your mold box around it. And with the mold box, you can see on this, these bits and pieces, that's from Lego bricks. The silicon's trying to get into between the Lego bricks. Okay, that's what those lines are. So these two molds that I showed before, the Firefly and the Dunzy cap, they're not actually sculpted on a cap. They were sculpted straight onto the synth. So that's why it's got a much lower profile and it looks a bit strange on the base because it's actually freehand sculpted onto here. But if you were to either sculpt straight on or onto a cap, you would slot that cap on, you would put it in your mold box, fill the top up and let it set and cure. Then what you do is, if you're casting with the synth, you would do what I did in the video, because you end up with this. You put the synth in the back of it, you fill it with your resin, Bob's your uncle. If you're doing it traditionally without the synth, then you flip that over, right? So that part doesn't exist. You take the bottom of your mold box off and you'll see this. And this is when you have to think about, do I want sprues, not sprues? I've tried both. Sprues are a pain to put on. You can cast without sprues, but you just need to work a little bit harder. You fill this side with silicone again, with or without sprues, let that cure, and then you have your two-part mold. You do want to have registration holes so that you can put the two parts together consistently the same, you know, etc., etc. And then once you pop that off, you can take out your original. The master might actually get destroyed in the process depending on the silicone and the material that you sculpt with, and the complexity and fine detail of the actual sculpt. And it's a very similar process. You fill it with resin and you can put the back into it, or you can put the two halves together and you can use injection and fill it with resin. I know that some makers, for example Cos, his method is he actually pre-fills the stem on the top half, lets that cure, then he fills in the bottom half, and then he puts the two together, and that ensures that you always get a perfect stem cast. And I have kind of done that before as well. So yeah, and that's kind of like a really quick overview on how you would cast on a traditional method. Does that help answer your question, Nicholas? Okay. Came with Ski with Pete. Yeah, well, thank you very much, Scottish Game Maker, for actually swinging by and staying and actually checking out this stream too. Robot Maxtron, no, thank you very much for coming along. I learnt a lot from Ergodox.io in regards to building my Ergodox, even with the pitfalls that I fell into. So thank you very much. Thumbs up for the resource that you've been able to keep alive. Ryan, what is my favorite keyboard? I have to break it down into a couple of different categories. Because I work with a lot of numbers, I'm an analyst, and I do a lot of inventory parts numbers as part of my work. I have to use a full size for efficiency. I have a Philco Magus Touch 1, Magus Touch 2, a Ducky Legend, and they're my three full size. So this is the MJT2. My MJT1 has some issues that I need to repair, and at work I use the Ducky Legend. I love the Legend because it's solid. That 5mm aluminium bezel and the steel plate, like, it's a brick. Doesn't flex, beat on it all day, MX Blues, awesome sound. In terms of a fun board, my favorite board at the moment for travel and taking around, as well as, you know, preaching the word of mechanical keyboards, is actually my Leopold. I'm going to take off my gloves now because I don't need them. I have a Leopold FC660C, so it's the top row version. It's not the MX switch version. That would be my favorite non-work keyboard at the moment, only because I don't have my Ergodox build fully up and running yet. I do have, as I mentioned, a Gherkin coming, so hey, we will have to wait and see. I do have a GH60. That was actually a fun one to build. I had a good time building it, and it's a little bit unusual because I didn't go with a case and I didn't go with a plate. Now I'm just rummaging my drawer so I can pull stuff out and show you what I actually do have here floating around. So if you haven't checked out my earlier videos, I've got a couple of videos relating to how I got to this, where it's at the moment. So this is the right hand of my Ergodox with Gatoron Greens and DSA Borealis mods. I have a grab bag coming from Pimp My Keyboards that I'm hoping to fill up with maybe some vomit keys. And then I have my IKEA chopping board GH60. So here's the GH60. It's got cherry PBT profile caps on them. It has no plate. It's a fully open design. It's got 6mm standoffs, and it fits perfectly on a $5 IKEA chopping board with a built-in wrist rest. How awesome is that? So, if I just move my Filco out of the way. Now, I use a 104 at home, a full size at home, because I do work at home at times. So, check it out. Look at it. Perfect fit. And even if you didn't want the actual wrist rest portion of this, it's actually exactly half of this chopping board. So I could get this chopping board, pass it through a saw, and then I'd have two, and I could mount two keyboards on it. So that's my GH60, and this has actually got cherry greens on it. So I like my clickies. I got blues on my work boards, but my play boards I've got greens. So yeah, that's my collection. My Leopold's sitting in another drawer in a sleeve, and I won't bother pulling it up because most people have seen straight up Leopold's. It's pretty factory, nothing super special on it, just a couple of my artisans that I have mounted on it. You can always look up on Mech Market and search by my name, or RAG caps, just RAG caps, and you can sort of see some of my previous sales and the caps that I've done as well. Or you can have a look at the artisan keycap directory that somebody's created. There's a Google Doc for it out somewhere. Actually, let me just put some more stuff away and I can share it on live stream if people are interested. All right. Let's make that full screen and turn on right monitor. But amazing, isn't it? So here's the Artisan Keycap Makers directory by Bambino. And if you've never seen this before, this is actually a cool little fun directory. It is community updated. Now, I don't update any of my own entries in here because there's not really that much to update, but I know that some of them are very up to date and some of them aren't very up to date for these different makers. You got a little sidebar menu, and you can find all sorts of different guys. So that's where I am, and you can see kind of like some of the designs that I've made before. They're different. Some of them are pretty horrible compared to really high quality artisan makers, but hey, I had a good time making them. Some of them sold, some of them didn't sell. At the end of the day, as long as I'm having fun and I'm not hurting anybody else, I'm not scamming people, I'm not taking their money, they know exactly what they're getting. I talk about defects, I show bubbles, I show the colors, all of that's fully laid out, so you can't really say what you got was not what you expected. That's pretty much it. All right, so let's just where's my cursor gone? Switch that off there. So yeah, any thoughts on caps unlocks and their 22 karat DSA keycaps? Oh, I think it's a little bit excessive. Having precious metals, rare metals is great. It's a lot of fun to be able to do things, and for example, like Rama with his liquid metal series, it's pretty cool. It looks nice, but I can't justify $64 for a metal cap, right? I can't really justify spending that much on a plain cap. Spending £910 on a 22 karat gold, I would be fearful of that cap disappearing or getting dinged or getting scratched or being damaged, because it's frightfully expensive. You'll notice I don't even wear any rings. On my day-to-day, I'm married, I don't even wear rings because they can catch on stuff, they can get damaged, they can get scratched, and so on and so forth. I wear a watch, but it's just a cheapo little Fitbit, and the band on it's already broken, so I've got a bit of elastic there that's actually holding the end of that tail in. I'm very utility, I'm very hands-on, so I'm afraid if I put an expensive cap on, it's just gonna get trashed. Concept, great. How many people have the money? Probably the people who can afford to buy $1,500 clacks. What can I say? Shareable, thank you very much on the chopping board mod. Grab bag cost an arm and leg. Okay, so Pimp My Keyboards right. If you're not familiar with the grab bag because you're kind of new to the community, they do this thing where start and tail runs stuff that's like seconds of their keycap sets, misprints, misalignments, wrong colors, excess junk. It all just goes into like this big tub. And when the tub fills up, they get a scoop and they fill up these 3-pound bags, right? And they ship them. Traditionally, they used to be $35 plus shipping, and then they tried to jack up the price. They got a bit of backlash on that and they brought it down, but they said, we're going to do flat shipping, which is really awesome because Australia and shipping sucks, right? It sucks balls. So when they said, we're going to do flat shipping for $15, I was like, excellent. $50 plus 15, 65 for 3 pounds or 1.2 kilograms of caps. When you consider one cap ordinarily weighs about 1 gram in plastic, that's potentially 1,200 caps for $65. It's a bargain. Even though I've been in this community for a while, I've only ever experienced, until recently anyway, cherry and OEM profile keys. I've experienced DSA very briefly now because I have DSA Borealis mods, and I experienced SA briefly when I went to the Sydney meetup last year and when my colleague got a SA Industrial key set. But I haven't actually typed extensively on his keyboard or anything like that. I've only seen him and helped him put it on his keyboard, and you know, I can hear him happily clacking away there. Getting this grab bag is a really good opportunity for me because I'm hoping it's going to have a mix of more DSA, more SA in the different row profiles, you know, because I think industrial is flat row 3 all across, maybe. So having the sculpted profile will be really cool. G20, you know, so being able to experience the different profiles, DCS, all that stuff will be a really good opportunity. It also means I'll have random vomit keys that I can use for, you know, completing my ergodox, completing, you know, if I manage to get a Minorca in the future, as well as the Gherkin, and that way I'm not going to be spending money that I don't have to spend trying to buy proper sets. Because at the end of the day, I don't really care that much. As you can see, I've got ninja prints on these. I do touch type, but I do need to have visual reference from time to time, which means the vomit isn't going to bother me because I'm not staring at them anyway. So yeah. Now, Tsubasa, would you happen to have a shareable link for us? A link to the directory? Is that what you are asking for? Because if you're looking for the link to the directory, I'll just chuck that into the chat right there. So yeah, the shipping is a steal. Now, if you weren't familiar with the grab bags and now you are, just be warned. The last sale, which I got my grab bag from, they had 300 bags and it sold out in 80 seconds. That's right, 1 minute and 20 seconds, all 300 went poof, vamush, gone. So I was actually really lucky to get one. I know that there were people who were upset because they had actually put it in their carts, but they hadn't confirmed payment. By the time that they did, it actually said the item had been sold out. So fastest finger, really. That's the best way to get in on grab bags. I don't anticipate that I'm going to be able to get another grab bag again in the future. It was just very lucky for me to do so this time round. All right, and you're welcome for that link. So we're running 1:43 now. Unless if anybody else has any more questions. Give a few seconds for the stream to actually catch up. Might end it there, and thank you very much for all of you guys actually coming on board and watching. I think we reached 12 people maximum watching, but you know, 12 people is better than a big fat 0, right? I hope my little stream today, it is actually the first time I've done a live stream ever that I was in control of anyway with content, as opposed to when I was on Top Clack on their live stream. I hope, you know, I was able to give you some really good hints and tips, just some thoughts on how the actual casting process was in regards to using a synth, and obviously for, you know, some of you guys, just the very simple basics on how to do normal silicon molds. There's heaps of resources out there, heaps of tutorials, especially in the subreddit, the R Mechanical Keyboard subreddit in the wiki, on how to do artisans, because lots of people have done up pictorials on the process. So if you are interested in doing casting and whatnot, make sure you head over there and check out the wiki. So both Nicholas, okay, so Nicholas got a bag as well, still waiting for it. Yeah, so am I. I actually checked last night, and I can sort of, I can't check at the moment because I'm logged into a different account, but supposedly it actually left San Francisco yesterday. So it's kind of floating in the air, doing, you know, flying things as caps do. If I'm lucky, I'll probably get it next week. If I'm unlucky, I'll get it the week after. So I do want to do a video. I might do it as a live stream to sort the caps. I don't know how long it's going to take. I've never actually sorted a grab bag before, but it's a good chance for people to just hop on as well and ask more questions and just chat and have a good time. So yeah, well, thank you very much, Ryan, for coming as your first stream. Thank you very much, Chris, for popping by. #1 fan status. Apparently someone's trying to knock you off, but Kevin didn't tell me who it was. So not that I'm trying to get competition between the two of you guys, but really appreciate your support. Now, you know, not that I'm begging for donations or anything like that. If you do like our content, either YouTube here or on our podcast series that you can listen to at theboardpodcast.com, you can find our donation PayPal link as well there on the front page. We run a hosting service on the podcast simply so you don't have ads. We do have ads running on our YouTube stream, but that's because, you know, every cent counts, and we'll see how it goes in the future. And hopefully maybe if the revenue from our YouTube channel increases, because right now it's a big fat zero, because we've only got 227 subscribers, pittance really, compared to say Pete, who's got 22,000, 100 times the number of subscribers here, then we'll be able to use that to get maybe like a better camera. You know, we can buy kits that we can build and review and stream for you. We can run giveaways, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So thank you very much for your support today. Kevin didn't tell you, frustrating indeed. So yeah, thank you very much for your support. Thank you for coming by, and I hope to see you again. And as my usual finishing catchphrase on the podcast series, until next time, happy clacking. Oh, so Ryan's saying happy to mod for me and get rid of the chat cooldowns. I actually set the cooldowns, yeah, so it's easier to manage, but you know, we'll have to see how it goes. I don't think there's a lot of people yet spamming a lot of junk, but we'll see. But thank you very much for the offer. Anyway, I'm going to go and have some breakfast now that the wife and daughter are awake. So happy Australia Day, and I'll catch you guys next time. Cheers.